Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams-Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams-Birch, and today's episode is an ACDA Advocacy and Collaboration Committee curated episode. I have the humongous honor of being the chair of that committee, and I'm surrounded by some incredible committee members, and we get to sit and talk about inspiring stories and transfers and collaborations and connections that are happening all across the country and the world when it comes to choral music. So these curated episodes are designed to help you think about ways to collaborate or advocate for whatever is going on in your musical world. In today's episode, we're talking to a fellow Standing Committee Chair, Dr. Joshua Habermann. He's the chair of the ACDA International Activities Committee. In this episode, we define what that is and what they do. We talk about the ICEP program, International Conducting Exchange Program. And then we talk a lot about other choir things, like the state of professional chamber choirs in the US and what the movement is looking like right now. We talk about the challenges of work-life balances and the choices that we all make. And I love this conversation because it's vulnerable and it's real, but it's also informative, and hopefully it will help you think about what your next steps could be for collaborating or advocating for international activities in your world. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at Perform International. Check them out, performinternational.com. It's also brought to us by our friends over on the Patreon page, patreon.com/musicedmatters. They get special bonus episodes every month, as well as a whole bunch of other little features that you can check out over on the website. Enough announcements. Let's hear this month's Advocacy and Collaboration curated episode with International Activities Chair, Dr. Joshua Habermann. Today on the Music Ed Matters podcast, we have an advocacy and collaboration curated episode with my friend, Dr. Joshua Habermann. Hello, Josh.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm really excited to hear all about what you're doing professionally, but also you are the chair of what awesome ACDA Standing Committee?
It is the Standing Committee on International Activities.
And has it always been called that?
I think so. It's relatively recent. So it's a committee that was stood up, in the last several years. And I followed TJ Harper, who was the previous chair, and he did really great work in trying to connect U.S. conductors to the wide world of choral music that's happening beyond our borders.
So you and I met back in 2015 when we were both International Conducting Exchange Program participants to Sweden.
Yeah, and that's the big thrust of our committee, is running that program. ICEP is this amazing opportunity for us to send delegations abroad and then receive from abroad delegations who come to our conventions. And it's been an incredible resource that a lot of people have participated in. And we've led exchanges, and by we, I mean the committee and ACDA in general, have led exchanges with incredible choral cultures like Cuba, China, South Korea, several Latin American countries, so Brazil, Argentina, Central American countries like Costa Rica, Guatemala, and then European countries as well. We're partnering this year with Germany. Emmy, you and I were in Sweden together previously as participants in this. So it's just an amazing program that brings a lot of great friendship across borders.
So the initiative of your committee is to continue those relationships internationally, specifically through ICEP.
Specifically through ICEP, and we have other initiatives as well. We're doing international rep seminars, so exposing American conductors to music from abroad, presented by people from those cultures who can, let us in to see it from an insider's perspective. So anything that we can do to try and make those international connections.
Wow. Okay. Question. What's the history of the ICEP program? Because I know when we went in 2015, there had only been a couple really recent groups that had gone, but there was some really rich history that I never really understood or got sorted out in my brain.
Yeah, it goes back to, I need to look up the exact date, but I want to say around 2010, 2011 was the first exchange. And those first exchanges were places like Cuba, where you otherwise couldn't go. It was sort of a difficult thing to arrange travel there. So that was a very, very special thing. And we had a lot of participants representing the United States who went abroad on that one. The idea, of course, is not unique. International exchanges have existed, for quite some time, but under the auspices of our committee and under the auspices specifically of ACDA, which is sponsoring these events, that's where it dates back to.
So I know there were some stipulations before you applied. For someone listening that's thinking, I would be interested in doing the ISEP program, what's the process to get involved? And then what does it look like once you're selected?
Absolutely. So this is a program that's targeted towards, we call it emerging or mid-career conductors. The idea there being that we want to have folks who are established in the field who will represent the United States well. We're interested in people from all corners of choral culture, which means everything from community choir leaders, children's choir leaders, community of worship leaders, secondary educators, university educators. Everybody is welcome to participate in this program. It's targeted, as I said, emerging mid-career, and what that means for us is we're not looking to create opportunities for people who are super well established in the field, incredibly well known, because we think, and ACDA thinks, those people have those opportunities already, and it's wonderful. We want to find people who are coming into leadership who maybe haven't had that kind of experience, but are ready for it and have done the quality work that really distinguishes them, but could use a leg up in getting into some more international venues and international exchanges and relationships. So that's the targeted audience. How do people apply? Then the whole thing is listed up on our website. So you just have to visit the ACD website and go to Standing Committee on International Activities. There's also an ISEP website that I'm sure we can link to in the episode and get people interested in it. But there's an application process that happens in the spring. Usually the deadline's around May, and people apply. There's a committee that reviews their work. That's letters of recommendation, video of conducting, statement of purpose. And then 6 fellows, that's the typical number now, are selected from that process to represent the diversity and breadth of American choral culture. And then from the partnering country, for example, this year the partner is Germany, they identify 6 conductors and we do a one-to-one exchange where people travel abroad. Well, let me start with the ones that come from abroad to the US. They'll come and actually visit each conductor in their home environment. So for example, if, your home environment is Topeka, Kansas, your visiting conductor comes to Topeka, Kansas either before or after the ACDA convention of that year. And then they also attend the ACDA convention. And then that return visit happens sometimes before, but most often after the ACDA event. So for this year in May, we're sending 6 Americans abroad to the Markt Oberdorf competition in Germany. And then they'll go on to the German National Choir competition in Hanover. And they'll spend a good 10 plus days traveling around Germany, visiting their partners there.
I just have such vivid memories of Anne Sophie who was my partner, and she came over when we were at ACDA Nationals in Salt Lake City. And there were so many good relationships and stories built then. And I was so excited to go over to Sweden I guess I went in August, I believe. And I got to go in schools. I remember having lunch with second graders who could speak better English than a lot of people that I know in the States. It was so much fun, but I still have songs and warm-up activities and folk tunes that I learned from being over there that I use regularly.
That's the thing, is we don't want it to be sort of, you go and you have fun and then nothing comes of it. The goal of ISEP is really that there be follow-on effects, legitimate long-term relationships built between conductors across borders. And I'll give you just a personal example. As you said, we were on the Sweden exchange together. And my partners came. I actually had 2 of them visit us in Santa Fe with the Desert Chorale, and they came on tour with us because we were traveling to ACDA National that year. So they were basically embedded with us on tour. They gave workshops everywhere we went on Swedish music. They worked with us in Swedish style. It was incredible. And then when I went over there, I did the same. And that led to a relationship that led me to taking the Dallas Symphony Chorus on tour to Sweden 2 years later. So it's
That's
really,
awesome.
it's great. And so the idea there is, obviously broadening our horizons, giving us tools, making Americans aware of what's happening abroad, but also really concrete follow-on effects that won't just affect the people who are participating in ISEP, but affect the broader community, because now you're in Savannah, you're bringing those workshop techniques, warm-ups into your broader community, people who have never been to Sweden and don't know anything about it, but are benefiting from the things that you learned. So that's the goal with ISEP, is for it to have a broader impact.
I love that natural collaboration aspect. I mean, pulling in the whole reason why we're doing this curated series of meeting all the other chairs, because there's collaboration in everything that we do. And through that, you're able to then advocate for things like ISEP continuing, which is just such a cool program.
Absolutely. That's our goal.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing all about that. And I will make sure to link all of those things in the episode notes. Now, you hinted at this in the conversation. You're still with your professional choir, right?
Yeah, Santa Fe Desert Chorale, New Mexico.
Okay. And how long have you been with them?
This is year 15.
Okay. I want to know what the difference is between professional choirs internationally and the state of professional choirs stateside.
Sure. So I'm not an expert on every professional choir that's out there in the world, and so I should, with that caveat. But certainly, in certain environments, there are structures that are really different. So if you look at the European professional choirs, the radio choirs, for example, in Sweden, Estonia, France, and Germany all have radio choirs and opera choirs. Those are largely state funded. So many of them have specific government support in a way that we don't in the United
Wow.
States. And of course, all of us Americans hear that and we think, oh, wouldn't that be a dream? Yes and no. There are advantages and disadvantages to every system, to be sure.
Yeah.
But those radio choirs, for example, the Baltic radio choirs, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, the Swedish radio choir, they have extraordinary support and resources, but they have to work within a system. BBC Singers in the UK, for example, is another example of this, an extraordinary professional choir. But they've been potentially on the chopping block recently because of government budget cuts. And so that's a very, very hotly debated topic right now. So there are upsides and downsides to every system. But I would say in the United States, we are experiencing right now a true growth period in terms of professional choruses. And many of us do receive some government support in the form of NEA grants, in the form of city grants or state grants. So the structures are potentially a little different, but our choral culture, especially in the professional sphere, is growing really rapidly in the United States, especially on the chamber choir side.
It's so exciting to hear. I know we have a brand new conductor in our city who came to us from a great place and immediately brought a bunch of singers into town for a professional group. And it was some of the best singing we've heard in town in some time. And so seeing that grow, what do you think is sparking this growth in the chamber choir culture right now?
Well, it's entrepreneurship for sure. And we should say that all of us stand on the shoulders of previous generations. Many people ask me, what's it like to start a professional choir? And say, I have no idea. I never did. I inherited the Desert Chorale. It's been around for 41 years. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that previous generation in the 70s, 80s that really began this movement. And Chorus America is a great
Mhm.
umbrella organization for choirs in that sphere, both professional and non-professional, children's choirs, adult community-based choirs. So, first of all, let's acknowledge that. And let's acknowledge our founder, in our case, in Santa Fe, Larry Banfield, who started the Desert Chorale in 1982.
Wow.
Yeah, so, that group has been around a long time. That said, in the last 10, 15 years, we're seeing tons of new groups popping up. And I think it's an interest in working not only in the traditional structures, so not only in the academic structures, whether that's primary, secondary, or post-secondary education, but also just striking out and saying, look, I have a vision. I have a passion for whatever it is, new music, early music, music of a certain period, music of a certain culture. I have a social mission, whatever it is, and then forming a choir around that. And I think it's a great thing.
It's exciting to hear that there's not like the box that people have to fit in, that there is a space for people to create their choirs to fit whatever need is in front of them. How do you describe the Santa Fe Desert Chorale to people?
The Desert Chorale is a completely generalist ensemble. And what that means is we're not early music specialists. We're not devoted solely to music before a certain period. We're not devoted solely to commissions, as many of our some of our peer organizations are, who are excellent, excellent, excellent. Our goal is really to be very broad based, and the reason for that is because our structure is a summer festival and a winter festival. So we're quite distinct from our peer organizations. I'd point to Conspirare as one that I used to sing in, and we share a lot of singers with them. Culturally, we're similar, but structurally, we're quite different because they function throughout the year. So they have concerts that, every 4 or 6 weeks, there's something Conspirare is doing. So they work throughout the year. We're very specifically a summer festival and a winter festival with occasional other events and tours and things like that. What that means is with all of our artistic activity jammed into a very intense period, we can't just do early music because we'd be doing 4 programs of just early music, 13 concerts. It's too concentrated. So what we have to do is offer a musical experience that is varied for our audience, who can come to an early music concert on Tuesday, and then on Thursday come to something contemporary, and on Friday come to a narrative-based program based around, something completely different that has romantic music in it. So for us, that's what's natural. We're also specifically located in the Southwest, and there's certain cultural resonances with that. I have a former life as a Spanish teacher, and so I've always been interested in Spanish language music, and that fits really well with our geographical position in Santa Fe. There's a 3 cultures side by side there, the native culture, the Hispanic culture, and the Anglo culture in New Mexico. So we tend to respond to that and have some sort of echo of that in our programming. And then we do a winter festival as well. So the summer festival is really one of the largest choral events in the United States because you can
Wow.
come, and in the span of 2.5 weeks of concerts, we're there for about 3.5 weeks of rehearsals, say 3 weeks of concerts. You can hear 3, 4 different programs, and you can hear them all in the span of 4 or 5 days because it runs like a repertory theater company where we open a show, keep it open, rehearse the next one, keep it open. So by the end of the festival, the last week and a half, we're just running shows constantly. So it's a really unique model. It's a great model, and it's the greatest choral summer camp that ever existed.
That sounds like such an innovative model, but it goes back to what you said a second ago, that there's such an entrepreneurial breadth into making these ensembles because they all function a little bit different. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone can be calibrated to the local conditions that are appropriate to that place. So for us in Santa
yeah.
Fe, everybody comes in the summer to experience the opera, the chamber music, and the desert chorale. And you get culture on a level of a major metro area. Really, really excellent work happening in all those ensembles, but in a town of 50,000 people that takes you 10 minutes to get across. So that's the draw for us in Santa Fe. In Minneapolis, it's going to be different. And in Sarasota, it's going to be different. And in New York City, it's going to be different. So every place has its own culture and its own structure that the choirs need to respond to.
You gave us some really good tips just in telling your story. You have to know your audience and what they have the ears and the time for. You have to know your community and the culture and what they're expecting or what would be respectful of them. And then you have to plan around what you have time for. And that repository theater, repertory theater,
Yeah.
that's such a great idea.
Yeah, and it didn't start with me at all. It was the model of the chorale, from the beginning, because they knew that's what fit for Santa Fe.
That's so interesting. Okay, so you've given us a little glimpse into the world of professional chamber choir in the US. You've talked to us about the international activities and some of those things that you're supporting. How do you have work-life balance with all of this?
This is a real challenge. I mean, all of us struggle with this. And I'm what I call a recovering academic, in that I worked in universities full time for 15 years, and I loved it. I loved it. Um, but I also worked in symphony choruses. That's been a love of mine since I grew up in the San Francisco Symphony Chorus, singing all those great masterworks, and I was always drawn to that. So I got into that work as well, and then of course this professional chamber choir world. And I'll be honest with you, I was really struggling. There was a time, this was some years ago, where I was trying to figure out how to do all those things, and do them well, and also just be a person in the world with a significant relationship at that time. I knew that there was potentially a family coming. That was something that I was, interested in. Um, and I didn't know how to do all of that and do it well. And I took a hard look at a workaholic father who I admired and appreciated, but perhaps knew my own tendencies were like his tendencies, and I tried to do an honest reckoning with that and say, I could feel myself drawn towards this. And I think that's so common in people in our field.
Mm-hmm.
We're workers. We want to do well. We want to represent well. And we never know when the next gig is coming. Musicians want to eat when there's food in front of them because we never know. And so we say yes, yes,
Right.
yes, yes to more and more. And if we're blessed, and I feel that way, blessed beyond measure to have those opportunities, then you get to the difficult discernment of how do you balance them. And that gets back to your question. And there was a point where I said, I know that I need to make some changes here. And that means leave taking and giving up. And that's hard. Um, but I know that it's the right thing. And so I shifted myself. This was back in 2011. An opportunity came up to do full-time symphony chorus work in Texas, which was a state that I loved. I had gone to school there and felt, it's a strong choral culture. And I knew that it would create space for a little bit more of a wife and a family and children who came, shortly thereafter. And when I package it in this way, it all sounds very neatly tied up, and then it all worked out. And I don't want to represent that at all.
Right.
It didn't. It's a constant, ongoing conversation with my wife, who's also choir director and also great at what she does. And we have two kids who are 11 and 8. And so it came again, sort of another inflection point came for me anyway, just speaking personally in 2020 with the pandemic. My wife had an opportunity. She's from Honolulu originally in Hawaii, and an opportunity came her way, and everything I was doing was shut down, like so many others. And we decided to give it a try. And that was very much a family-based decision and also a decision acknowledging that she had followed me for 17 years at that point. You know, everywhere. She had left Hawaii to come to San Francisco with me and then to Florida and then to Dallas. And so it seemed right that maybe that equation could shift a little bit. And so we made that choice, and we're living in Honolulu now. But I'm still traveling, and I'm talking to you now from San Francisco, where I'm doing a project with the symphony, and it's not all balanced. It's not all
Right.
perfect. It isn't.
But it's a
But
conversation.
the conversation that's open and that we continue to have and try and figure out, and I think that's the best that you can do.
I think it's so important to acknowledge it too, because and you're right, in our field, we all just go, 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 say yes, say yes, say yes. And that has been something that we've talked a lot about in our family. My husband and I are both self-confessing workaholics, and we hold each other to it. So when there's those weeks that go by that we're like, oh my gosh, wait, we haven't stopped working before 9 or 10 o'clock any night this week, we have to stop. So putting those boundaries, but it's such a hard thing to do. And you're right, you have to reevaluate it all the time.
Yeah, yeah, and I haven't solved it, but I would say acknowledging those tendencies, and they can be cloaked very often in good intentions, which they are, I no doubt. But there's also a piece of them that sometimes can be sort of self-regarding,
Mm-hmm.
and I think and I feel the pull of that, and oh, I would get to do X, and I would be perceived in a certain light. I feel the siren song of that sometimes and how attractive that is. And I think, okay, I'm not alcoholic. I'm not an addictive
Right.
personality in this way, but I do acknowledge in myself this, like, sometimes, okay, I feel that pull and how juicy that seems to me. And I wonder if that's really what I need to do, or whether this is just sort of more empty calories in my diet when I have, you know, a spouse or an 11-year-old at home that needs me and an 8-year-old at home that needs me. Um, and I'm working on that. And as I said, I haven't solved it. but it's something that I try and reflect on.
It's so important to hear people talk about it, though. It's a lot like mission creep in a nonprofit. You say yes, you say yes, you say yes. You have to really, I remember so vividly a board member when we were developing our mission for a nonprofit I started a couple years ago saying, create a mission statement that you can measure everything against so you don't have any type of mission creep.
Mm.
And that, I think, is where many of us say yes, say yes, say yes. But you need to have that mission somewhere in your soul to test against it.
Yeah, and make sure that it's serving your values and what you value most highly,
Mm-hmm.
because there are many, many good things to do. And you and I both
Mm-hmm.
serve our national organization, which I believe in. I know you do too. We wouldn't otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a constant conversation for them too, I'm sure, about what is it that we can do well. And, given limited human and financial and time resources, where do we really need to focus? And I think the pandemic was as destructive as it was to our art form. I think it was a really great opportunity to reevaluate,
Mm-hmm.
choose again, and say, okay, I'm coming out of this now. Instead of just doing what I did before, I have an opportunity to choose again and recommit to the things that I really believe in, and perhaps let go of those things that don't serve enough, given limited time, talent, all that stuff.
Those are such good reminders, Josh. Thank you for opening and sharing that with all of us and the listeners. It really does kind of bring it full circle. Because if you go back to the beginning of our conversation, talking about the opportunities with international activities, they're designed for those people that are in the beginning or mid of their career that are ready for that next step up. So they can start getting these opportunities to evaluate yes or no moving forward and finding the right balance.
Hmm. Absolutely.
It's it's such a good full circle of the whole conversation. I'm so thankful that we could bring you on and do this. I have to ask you some end of show questions. They're totally random. Are you ready?
Yeah, go.
Okay, have you been reading any good books or do you have a favorite book?
Ooh, do I have a favorite book? I can't say that I have a favorite book. I'm a poetry fan. That is sort of what I most love. And so the books that sit on my bedside table are poetry of Rumi and Hafiz, who are both Sufi mystic poets
Okay.
who write about connection to things greater than oneself, which I think is the basic undergirding principle of choral music. And I'm really drawn to their thinking and their writing. I love it.
Awesome. Okay. So poetry by Rumi and
Hafiz, Hafiz.
Hafiz. Got it. And then are there any organizations or people that you would like to illuminate that really matter to you right now?
Oh gosh.
I know
Well,
it's tough.
yes. How much time you got? I mean, shout out to our national organizations, ACDA and Chorus America. You know,
Mhm.
ACDA that you and I both serve, and Chorus America, whose mission I very much believe in, is community-based and helping us govern choral music.
Mhm.
You know,
Oh, will you be at the conference in June in San Francisco?
no, I am sorry to say that I won't, and I'm in San Francisco now.
Oh man.
I'll be there the week before here, the week before, and the week after the conference.
Oh, just missing you.
Just missing it, but because that week in between was the only week that I could be home,
You got
taking
a
up again,
work-life balance.
again,
Yes.
I,
Yes,
I
it's so important.
I just knew that I couldn't. So I'm really sorry, because San Francisco, of course, is the best ever, and I would love to be there. But yeah, I'll lift those two organizations up, along with perhaps shout out to the Hawaii Youth Opera Chorus, where my kids are singing, community-based children's choir,
Cool.
who are doing great work to preserve Hawaiian cultural heritage through choral music.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, I'll make sure to highlight that too. All right, final question. What is the one thing that really matters that you want the listener to walk away from this episode with?
Um, Two things related, I would say. Number one, you are not alone. And that's the story that I keep telling, because it's the story of choral music. And I think that so many of us carry coded into our DNA this longing for connection and this longing for community, this longing for to be heard. And I think choral music addresses that. I don't think it's the only thing that does. I think that there are many ways to find that community and that connection. But for me, I've always found it through choral music, and that sense that I have when I'm experiencing it, that boundaries are revealed to be ephemeral. Those boundaries that seem to divide us as humans into camps, into identities that are separate from each other, are revealed in the greatest, most beautiful moments of music making to truly be transparent and not solid. And those things that keep us separate from others and a greater sense of purpose are proven to be untrue, that we are connected and we feel that in our most beautiful moments. And I guess that's the story of choral music for me. And I think for maybe others as well.
That the transparency of those boundaries, that's such a vivid and poetic image too. Thank you for sharing that, Josh. That's so good too. Hey, I appreciate your time.
Of course, it's a pleasure to talk with you always. I have greatest respect for all that you're doing and for being willing to take this time with me and share what's happening in our choral culture.
It's so exciting. Have so much fun in San Francisco.
Thank you.
All right, friends, what do you think? After we finished recording the conversation offline, we were talking more about work-life balance, and Josh said something that I really want you to hear. I said that sometimes it's really hard to decide what to say yes or no to, and you have to sometimes say no. And Josh said, you also sometimes have to say yes and then figure out whatever repercussions that might make. So if you say yes to something, what does that mean you're going to have to say no to? Or if you say yes to something, what crazy thing will you have to do to make that happen? And where's the balance in that? And the really cool part about this conversation, friends, is that none of us have this whole work-life balance choice thing figured out, but we're doing it together. So going back to what Josh said at the end, you are not alone. How awesome is that to hear? We are in this awesome community together. So I am very, very glad that you think that music matters and that you took time to listen to this episode. I hope that you know, my friend, that you matter. We all know that music matters, especially international activities and professional chamber choir movement and work-life balance and whatever choices we make in that regard. And I'll see you next time on the Music That Matters podcast.